All right. Well, welcome everyone. Some of us already know the drill. We're here to just chat and ask questions and learn from practitioners in the IO community. So, I don't think, is there any new people? I feel like we've all been here. Oh, well, welcome, welcome. So the format is pretty laid back. If you have any questions, just put your hand up or you can put it in the chat, whichever is easiest. We just kind of have a conversation. Everybody's welcome to contribute and ask questions as they need to. And we have a speaker in every group and every meetup that we have. And today our speaker is Hayley. And I'm going to go ahead and let her tell us a little bit about herself and how she got to where she's at today and so on and so forth.
I'm excited to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm actually calling in from Santa Marta, Colombia. I have gotten myself to a point in my career where I can take my work anywhere. And my husband is Colombian, and we are our two small children. We wanted to learn the language, experience their heritage and their culture, and learn how to cook the food and the traditions, etc. So we came here. So I'm excited to chat with you all today, answer any questions that you have. A little bit of background about myself. I actually did not know I wanted to go into IO psychology. I somehow kind of fell into it a little bit. When I started my undergraduate degree, I was really scared. I had a child when I was 18. Things were, kind of tumultuous, and I didn't know, what tomorrow was going to bring. But I did know that I needed to do something different to change my life and that of my child. So I actually started school in 2007, and I started for like a business admin associates. And when I took my first psychology class, I fell in love, and I ended up signing up for a bunch more of these extra psychology courses. And it was my instructor who recommended that I go into IO. And so I did the research on it, and it sounded really perfect for me. It sounded like some of the work I was already doing at my job. And it sounded like things that matched natural tendencies for myself. So I ended up switching my degree and double majoring in psychology and business. I already had so many business credits, it only made sense to double major at that point. And then I rolled right into a master's in industrial organizational psychology. I focused more on the science of corporate behavior and the application of psychological principles in the workplace. After that, I had no idea what I was going to do with my degree. I knew that I wanted to do something big, and I wanted to help people, and I wanted to change the way that things happened and felt at work. I had worked at Autodesk starting in around 2007. And that was my first opportunity to really get like a corporate job, like a real job. I worked as a people operations coordinator and a metrics reporting analyst. So it was my first job in a big corporate company, but it was also with a company that was touted as like one of the number one companies to work for, the greatest places to work. You could bring your dog to work. They stocked the fridges before it was cool and had ping pong tables before it was a thing. It was like the place to work. And so in my opinion, it didn't get much better than working for this kind of company. And to my surprise, it was not at all what I expected. And I thought to myself every day, I was sitting there going, is this is it? Like this can't be it, right? Like there's got to be more than this. This can't be like reaching it. And the way that people were treated at work, the energy, the environment, the culture, all of it, there was so much more that people could be doing. And so these two kind of worlds collided for me. And I realized real soon after that IO was definitely going to be a field that I was going to excel in, that I was going to be happy in, that I was going to make a difference in. I just didn't know how. And so I will say that from the very beginning, I started my own company. So right after I Right after I graduated from my master's degree, I started my own consulting organization. I didn't create an LLC or an S Corp or anything like that, but on paper, I was my own boss and running my own consulting organization. I was doing coaching, I was doing consulting, I was doing, basically at that point, anything anybody would give me an opportunity to do. And half the time I would do it for free in the beginning, honestly. And so, I got all of these really great opportunities. And I think people tell you that your network is everything. And I will say that has followed me to be pretty true most of my career. I didn't do the traditional master's degree where I was like, in a room with a bunch of other people, but I did have the same cohort working through, an online format. And so it is a little bit different. And I think you make your network along the way through the people that you are in school with, but also the people that you work with in those early years when you're still trying to figure out who you are and what you want to do with the skills that you're obtaining, right? And so, I ended up getting promoted at Autodesk. I ended up doing well. I left Autodesk and I got a really great opportunity to move to another country. And so I took that opportunity and I moved to another country and I joined a couple of groups there. Some of them were like international industrial organizational psychology groups. Some of them were the the International Association for, what was it? I'll have to think of it. Sorry, but I'll send it to you guys in the chat as soon as it comes to my mind. But it was actually a group that I ended up partnering with when I moved to China to work on trying to figure out how to do business with Chinese corporations. Now think back to like the beginning of 2008, 2009, 2010. And this is when big corporations like Google and Apple are trying to partner with companies in China or to expand business into the Asia Pacific area. And they're failing miserably for lots of reasons, because we didn't understand how business operated in the Asia Pacific area or in that culture. And so we did a lot of research on how to, the differences, the disparities in business, and then created trainings to help train individual executives and teams and corporations on how to partner with businesses in China. Through that, I met a lot of people in my network as well, which, led me to some other opportunities after I finished my master's degree. I thought all I wanted to do was work kind of externally as a consultant, and I never wanted to be on staff. But I think that changed for me real quick once I had my first opportunity in a construction company. But I will say that, after my master's degree, once I graduated and I started this company and I started somewhat marketing myself to my network and whatnot and having different opportunities, it was when it started to become a little bit more clear to me as to where I wanted to be, where I wanted to place my skills and what I wanted to do with my degree. But it still didn't become clear until, years later. So I ended up, this is a long bio, but I think that's why we're here. Anyway, so that really led me to other opportunities with startups, having a very open-minded perspective and trying to invert the way that business had been done so far, really blowing the scientific management theory completely out of the story. So it wasn't even an option anymore. Micromanaging wasn't even like a choice. We just really needed to do a lot of work. We needed to change the way that we were doing business. And instead of protecting the companies, we needed to start building them around the people and protecting the people. And so I started targeting newer companies, startups, businesses in my industry that had never had somebody on their staff to help them build their policies, their programs, their procedures, help to really structure their culture and their people operations infrastructure around the company that they wanted to be in the future, and who they wanted to be for their people. So I had several opportunities to work for lots of different startups. I think the smallest one was a seed round, and the largest one was Series C. Once I got to about, well, once I got a company to about Series C was when I needed to leave personally, because I'm sure everybody's had their experience with a company that is too processed and it takes too long to create change or to even just get something approved. So I don't really know how to operate in those companies. I say I don't, but it's more that I don't want to. Um, and so, yeah, that led me to where I am today. I have two of my own companies, and they feed off of each other. One's in the US and one's in Colombia. But through all of my experience in startups and HR and working as an executive coach, etc., I've realized that there is a sweet spot, kind of like a sensitive period in the life cycle of an organization. And oftentimes they think that that's later, but I believe, and my research has shown, that it's in the beginning, to nearshore, to outsource, to offshore, to try to utilize all of these different methods and techniques that are there to augment when you don't have all of the resources necessary to do it yourself. So my company today partners with pre-seed to Series C startups that have meaningful missions that are really trying to do something unique and different in the world. And we help source talent, mostly engineers at this point, from Colombia for those startups. But we're kind of inverting the whole nearshoring market, because we're doing it on full transparency. So not only do you know what that person that you're hiring makes, but you're actually going to be responsible for helping to negotiate that pay. And then we built a calculator. So you punch in what you want to pay that person, and it breaks down exactly where all the other money goes. Not just the general, like, oh, here's benefits and taxes. It tells you this is this tax and here's how much. This is this benefit and this is how much. Here's our fee and this is how much. And those things don't change. There's no surprises. And in addition to that, we've also created a clear and affordable path for companies to take on their people full time, especially because they're responsible for building their product. And then we help guide them along that process to help an entity in Colombia with a very easy checklist and a very seamless and affordable process. So that's me.
You've definitely done a lot. So I know that you mentioned that it took you a little bit to realize where you wanted to go with IO. What were some of those turning points that made it clear for you, this is where I want to go? Because as we all know, IO is vague and vast, and I mean, you can do 1,000 things with it. So what was it for you that you realized, oh, I think this is the direction I want to take?
I knew while I was still in my degree that I wanted to be a practitioner, that I did not want to do academia. And I was told my whole educational career that I had to choose one or the other, that I could not do both, and that I needed to be very careful, because if I wanted to be a practitioner, then I needed to be very careful to avoid anything academia related, because that will pigeonhole me and I will have a more challenging time being a practitioner in my field. And I will say that I found that to actually not be true. And I wish that I had taken some more of the opportunities that had been presented to me at the time. Not only was I told that, but I was also told, oh, you can't teach unless you have a doctorate. And I know that, like, I can't teach at Harvard or Stanford, and I can't teach certain master's classes without a doctorate, yes, but I am 100% qualified with just a master's degree to teach at many institutions across the US and other countries, actually. And my alma maters both offered me adjunct professor roles straight out of my degree. And I didn't take them because I was worried about being pigeonholed into academia. And I think I could have learned so much from that experience, and I would have been able to expand that network that I was telling you earlier is responsible for where I am today, is partially responsible for where I am today. So I will say that I think that a lot of people have really great advice, but be careful who you're receiving it from. Make sure that they're people that are current in the industry, that have a steeped experience in the section of the industry you think you want to go into. And if something doesn't seem like it makes sense, like, well, why can't I be a teacher too? I see so many CEOs that are also teachers and do all this other stuff. Well, that's because you can. So don't say no if you think that it's something that will expand you. Just, if it's something like, for me, I feel like if I could go back, I would take on one adjunct professor job, right? I wouldn't take on multiple. I wouldn't do multiple at a time. I would just do one, and it would kind of be like a hobby. But so that's one area. I would say that the whole time that I was in my career, people told me that I needed to find my niche, right? I had to pick something, and I couldn't because, I was coming out of this degree and there were so many things in it that I felt like I was good at, and so many things that called to me that I was passionate about. Yes, I want to do talent acquisition. Yes, I want to do, leadership development. Yes, I want to do this and that. And I was told, well, you can't do it all. You have to choose something. And that was a lot of pressure for me on my journey. And after I graduated and I started looking for roles, I was even still leaning on my supporting faculty at my degree to say, hey, what do you think about this one? It's really hard. I was lost, completely lost on what to apply for, how to apply my skills, where I would actually be happy and do a good job. And I felt so much pressure from this. Like you have to make a decision as to what part of IO you're going to go into, what part you're going to focus on. And I will say that I fought it tooth and nail, as if it was one of those other areas that I could disrupt and change, right? But it wasn't until I actually found my niche that I realized how important it really was, not just to my career development, to my happiness, to my applicability of my skills, but even like simple things like my elevator pitch, right? I had so much stress over creating a bio or an elevator pitch before because I was so widespread. Like I wanted to do everything, so I couldn't really focus on how to show you that I brought value. So, and that niche I didn't find by research or reading. I found it by experience. I just had to do different things and figure it out. And I think I found out real quickly that HR, like general HR, is not what I want to do. HR as a piece of overall organizational development, yes, 100%, right? So you just kind of get into these roles and you figure it out. I will say also that people will tell you that especially at IO or HR, that the traditional path is one that you're going to have to follow, that, this traditional ladder of, working as an assistant and then a generalist and kind of working your way up is the only way you're going to make it. And I'll tell you, that's also a lie. If any of you looked at my LinkedIn, I was never an HR generalist. In fact, the only class in my career that I failed was HR management. But I think you figure it out. You start to kind of do different things. You get different opportunities, and you start to feel the pull, the passion, the desire to do something more than something else, something that will keep you up at night or get you up earlier in the morning than you want to wake up because you can't stop thinking about how to fix it, and you want to test out a theory or somebody told you something and you want to respond to them or whatnot. So I don't know if there's any specific moments that I can think of, other than the academia practitioner piece, where I knew which avenue I wanted to go down. But But I think you do end up finding that throughout the course of your experience.
And I like the way that you approached a lot of these myths or ideas that other people may have about how you should go about your path, which is another reason why we have these meetups, right? So we can all see what everybody else is doing, then you get to make your own path. So with that being said, what do you think were some of the skills that helped you the most specifically? I know starting a business right after grad school with no previous background or experience or whatever people want right after you get out of grad school. How did you overcome that, and what skills were helpful to be able to say, yes, I may not have A, B, and C, which is what you're required, but I have this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that over the course of my life, I've experienced a lot of adversity and trauma, and things that have helped me grow as a human. And so, because of that, I feel like you tend to see the story differently. And so, when something is a weakness, for me, I don't necessarily see it as, oh, I have to hide it or make it seem like it's something different. It's more like that's a big part of my story. And I have an idea of why that's a weakness and what it is that I would do specifically in order to improve upon it. And so I think that the skills that you can use, right out of school or, any time in life, right, are really to just believe in yourself, to understand that you're never going to have all of the qualifications. You're never going to be fully qualified. You're not going to have like everything everybody tells you that you have to have, and you don't have to wait for that. If you wait for perfect, you'll wait forever. What people say about babies. You wait for the perfect time, you're never going to have one. So sometimes you just have to dive in and you have to trust yourself and your passion. Because sometimes all you're writing is your passion. And you don't know what you don't know. And I think that when I work with professionals that can admit that, right? Not even just admit it, but function off of the understanding that they don't know what they don't know, and they're there to learn just as much as they are to teach. Surrounding yourself with those types of people and those types of mentors was a big part of helping me grow. People who weren't afraid to give you constructive feedback. I would say another great skill would be finding your Kanban board, or find your Trello, or like whatever it is that works for you to keep your shit organized. Because when it comes to IO psych, it's okay. It's a little, sorry, I'm in a public place because we're doing construction on our house. So, because when it comes to IO psych, and it is especially depending on how you apply it, right? So if you're applying it in the corporate workplace, like you don't just have your things going on and the company's things going on. You have like John Smith's things going on, and you've got the CEO's things going on because you're a corporate therapist, and you've got, the marketing manager's issues, and then the marketing manager's subordinate who's got issues. Like, you don't just have one thing. You got to figure out how to keep everything organized. And where so many people are going to depend on you, figuring out how to keep your stuff organized and not let anybody down. Because I'll say that's something I did in the beginning, and it hurts a lot when you know that you hurt somebody else, right? And you could have avoided it by being a little bit more organized, or having your stuff together. So that would be another thing I would recommend. And then I'd say just like right out of school, talk to everybody. Talk to anybody, talk to everybody. Ask a lot of questions. Hey, I just got out of school. This is my degree. This is how I was thinking about applying it. How would you apply this in your industry? What are some of the pain points? What are some of the challenges that you're having? Right? How would you see this like applying to what you're doing? And the more you talk to people and get their opinions on it, the more you can start to feel your puzzle fit in a certain industry, or a certain skill set underneath the umbrella of IO. I don't even know, what are we calling them? categories?
Nobody knows at this point. I think one really cool thing is that every time we've had speakers here, everybody talks about how important networking can be and how important it can be when it's one, intentional, and two, when we know how to use that dynamic by not only expecting something from that person, but really building some sort of connection. I mean, you're not going to become best friends with everybody you meet, right? But I think there's a lot of information that you can learn from other people. And one of
I would
the,
always, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
I was
interrupt
just
you.
gonna say, sometimes like, even if you just learn, like how you're saying, if you just ask, hey, this is what I do, how do you see it applying? And people love to talk about their work and what they do, and they're gonna
And
share.
themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and themselves. So whenever you put it in that way, you're networking, you're connecting, you're communicating, and you create a connection that maybe in the future they'll think about you whenever something like that comes up, and you never even asked for it. And I think that's the coolest thing, that you have to approach all of these things very strategically. But I don't think that's ever really explained. Like when you get out of school, it's just like, go out there, network, get a job, and you're like, but where's all this in between? Like, how do you do this? And I think unless you have a really good mentor, we can all really just mess that up. The networking the very first times, we just be doing some stuff out there that we're like, why? Who let me?
Let me talk.
Who let me talk?
I usually recommend that employees read Never Split the Difference. I think it's Chris Voss that writes that one. And it's about like negotiations and stuff, but really it's about how to talk to anybody. It's about how to use questions to talk to, you could talk to a genius, right? And not be intimidated and actually have a meaningful conversation with this person, right? So I really like that book. And then I usually recommend to my clients that they read the No Asshole Rule, because it combines a little bit of the first one and also how to create a culture of collaboration, communication, and no brilliant assholes kind of thing.
And what was the first one?
Never split the difference.
I'm gonna put it on the chat so we can go back.
Looks like there's some questions in there too.
Oh, thank you, Ron. That's already on there. I was gonna put the links on there, but yeah, I got beat to it. Cool. There, that we can all have the direct links.
No, yeah, the no asshole rule.
No assholes. Okay. I think you put the, yeah, gotcha.
Awesome. And I think that it wasn't a question, but I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't bring it up during the call, that I think that as you are all navigating this kind of, somewhat murky waters in the beginning, no one's immune. No one's immune to rejection. They're not immune to, saying the wrong things or, having a bad elevator pitch or whatnot. And just remember, these are the things that actually like make you the leader that you're going to be, or the professional that you're going to be. And they help you build that compassion and that empathy for the people who are going to go through the same thing, so that you're not using that as like a notification to, that you have more power in the situation, right? You see it as like an indication that that person is in a similar situation you've been in before. So you're going to alter it to make them more comfortable, because that's your job, right? I will also say that being a woman in this industry, in this role, has been very challenging. Not only, I think, because I was part of a cohort that was first bringing IO psychology into mainstream. So, when I was doing this, I was still educating people as to why they wanted people like me, why they wanted to focus on culture, why they wanted to retain their people. Now we've made this big shift. COVID was awesome for this, but like we've made this big shift into understanding that this is actually where the sweet stuff is. This is where the good stuff grows, right? And so it's just been a very difficult industry to be in, I think, for a man or a woman, having to be those initial kind of disruptors, but also um, the experiences with misogyny, with gaslighting, sexism, harassment. I mean, it all exists. And I'm sure, honestly, it does for men as well. But I will say that, it wasn't that long ago, just a few short years ago, when I was working for a $2 billion construction company as a consultant for their C-level staff that was dysfunctional. So I went in and I did a bunch of observations and assessments and really worked to help build a proposal as to how we could fix this, right? And when I went in for the feedback meeting with the CEO and was providing unfiltered feedback, I then paused and said, this is a two-way street. You can provide me with feedback as well. To which he said he didn't have feedback, but then, interrupted later and said, well, actually, you could wear like pants and like smaller heels, maybe. Oh, that kind of feedback. So if you think that it's over and it's not really happening in the workplace today, it is, and it's happening in big companies, and it's happening with qualified professionals. What I looked like and how I dressed had absolutely nothing to do with the job I was doing. Right. And the fact that I was intimidating was probably actually a good thing. But the perspective here is that of the CEO. So what do we do in this situation? Do we try to like overhaul and completely change the way this person thinks? Right. So that was heartbreaking for me. I had worked for months on this project and I actually pulled out because it no longer aligned with my values. Right. So have those values, those personal values dialed in, your non-negotiables, right? The things that you are not willing to negotiate on when it comes to working for or with someone else. Depending on what field you go into in underneath IO, I think all of them are challenging in their own way, but I've been pressed up against the wall a lot by companies asking me to do things that aren't right, that are either illegal or just morally or unethical or just not right or against my own code of conduct or values. But if I didn't have that already, if I didn't already know in my core what I stood for and my line, what I was willing to do and which, what line I wasn't willing to cross, I think that it would have been extremely challenging for me to move forward. And I probably would have done some things that I would regret today.
I really like that you point out a lot of the things that, and I don't think we have discussed a lot. I know we had another speaker that talked about the racism in the workplace as well. And sometimes there are a lot of unspoken things happening in the workplace that as IOs, we go in and we hope to make the place better. And we're here to solve issues. And then we walk into very unsafe, just dangerous situations where, like you said, if you don't have that moral compass in place, it can be very, very difficult for you and the people that you're working with. And then, of course, that's going to dictate where your professional career goes because you're going to be tested. And I think it's good to talk about it because although, men can experience this, I think women also need to be able to have that space to say, I feel uncomfortable and I am no less professional because I'm walking away from this. I think just the sexism overall, it's something that needs to be discussed and something that we face. And I think at the end of the day, if you have that moral compass and you know who you are and what you stand for, it's a lot easier to walk away and say, not for me. You can do whatever you want. I will respect it, but I'm just going to go ahead and just be good with myself and who I want to be in the kind of company that I want to run.
It becomes easier too to figure out the kinds of questions that you want to ask when you're interviewing. So when you're in that interview process and you're trying to figure out the kind of culture and the energy and the environment that this company has, you'll already know what types of questions to ask to get a feel for that, to say, okay, this may or may not be the type of company I'm going to feel comfortable in. Man or woman, if the company is a safe space, is psychologically safe, then you can talk about anything, right? Those are the types of companies that aren't afraid to start the dialogue and not control the narrative.
Mhm.
And that's a very scary thing for a lot of companies and leaders today.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, anything you might want to add? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So just to introduce myself, my name's Helen. It is so nice to be here and getting to hear and see all of you guys. So my question is, right now I am in my going into the fall semester. It's gonna be my last year in the IO Psych. Um, I'll be graduating, but I was wondering if there's anything that I could be doing right now to help me, get my foot in the specifically like HR field, because I know you say you don't really like HR, but like that's what oh, thank you. That's what I am thinking about doing. And like, like the job market, it's very competitive right now. I've applied to so many and either I haven't gotten any, responses, like because there's like ghost jobs and stuff like that. But also like I'm getting a lot of rejections and I feel like I'm not really making use of my time when I could be doing something else. So I was wondering, like, in your experience, what could I do to kind of gain experience other than like, specifically getting a job and hoping to get that interview to be able to do something productive?
Well, I mean, I'll go first, Gabby. I think that, especially from the perspective of a recruiter too now, which I never thought I would call myself, but here I am. It's difficult to engage with students, especially when, you know, we might know that you're graduating at the end of this school year or whatnot, but if we're not exactly sure how you're going to apply your skill set because you haven't shown a track of that, I think that's something that can maybe withhold people from wanting to hire a student that hasn't actually applied the skill set yet. Um, I think that there are a lot of entry level jobs that people don't hire people like yourself for, primarily because you're probably considered overqualified for the job, which I know sounds a little silly, but when I graduated from my master's degree, a lot of people told me I was overqualified for some of these like generalist positions, but I had never done them before. So how could I possibly be overqualified for them? So it's a bit of a catch 22. I say right now, what you can be doing is you can be researching the types of companies that you want to work for. If you don't already know what you want to do for them, then, trying to figure that out. What Color is Your Parachute is like a really interesting book. It talks a lot about like, if you don't know what you want to do in life, but it can actually help you figure out how you want to apply your current skill set. And then there's a lot of other books as well, but I would suggest if you have a mentor, working with that mentor, seeing if there's any kind of projects that you can work on right now. Your free help. I would love free help, right? So there's got to be other people out there that are interested in having you shadow or mentor them during certain types of activities. Let's say, for example, you wanted to go into more of like corporate therapy, right? Would you be able to sign an NDA and then sit in on some of those meetings, or potentially even review some of the recorded calls and the patient notes or meeting notes, right? To get an idea for how these people, these professionals that are a little bit more steeped in the industry are doing it. What is it that do you know what specificity you want to do?
So I'm really interested in going into the HR field, specifically in
Just general HR. What was the specific? Sorry.
training and development.
Okay, awesome. So, like for example, if you could, reach out to maybe even like a local nonprofit, right? I'm sure that you have some great ideas for how to improve some of their processes. Some of them might let you in and say, Yeah, here, if you could help us, recreate our performance management or something like that. I worked with Great Places to Work for a little bit on a volunteer basis in the beginning, just trying to kind of get an idea for how, they did proposals and worked with clients. And um, it doesn't have to be a nonprofit. It can be a company too. It can be, hey, I'm about to graduate and I'm really interested in learning and development. It could be a company, like a gamification company, for example, right? And they're going to apply gamification in order to help people learn and develop. So you could learn so much from doing an apprenticeship or mentoring with someone there. Who was I should remember because she was so influential. There was a woman at a larger company that agreed to mentor me for a little bit here and there. And I would just kind of reach out and email questions back and forth. We'd meet once a month on a video call. And that was very useful for me as well. Trying to think of like what else you could do. I think that it's important to show that you're really passionate about what you're doing, right? So in any way that you can do that. So if you're not working in that particular field, what are you doing in that particular field to keep yourself educated and kind of on top of the trends and the information that you need to know in order to be good at it. And I would say networking, talking to people. Your friend's dad probably knows someone who works at, EY or, who can get you an interview. And that interview might not lead to a job, but that interview could lead you to another interview or could lead you to a connection with some person who could connect you with your next job. And that's approximately like, honestly, that's kind of how it's happened for me most of the time has been these like weird interactions or connections, like, back alley, kind of shady, but it's not. Do you know what I mean? Um, and then I would just join as many groups as you can. There are a lot of companies out there looking for people to join like advisory boards of their software in HR or talent acquisition or training and development. You could join one of those groups, and then not only do you have access to all of those people, but you have access to all of that information that people are sharing back and forth that you can then use to translate into work that you create for other people, or information that you use to get your next job. Hopefully that was helpful.
While you were talking, I was thinking of and I'm gonna see if I can find it. There's also companies that are startups that are looking for people to volunteer to do their HR, technically to do like a whole management team to volunteer because they're starting out. And I think that's a good opportunity for you to start doing those things. I know on the chat, some people were saying internships, entry-level jobs, pro bono. Informational interviews can be very helpful because that's how that so-and-so knows somebody else that needed this, and you can get a lot through there too. Yeah. Regional professional network groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are always helpful.
Mhm.
But the more you talk about what you do and the more passionate you are about it, the more that you educate people on IO and how you're applying it, the more they're going to think about you when something comes up. Right. So it might not manifest into something today or tomorrow, but I'll say like to some of the people that I spoke to in the beginning of my career, 10, 15 years ago, one of them is actually a client now of my business. So founder-led sales, right? It kind of comes back to you over time. Like I wasn't ready. We weren't ready for a partnership then, but now we are. And I think that that's like the beauty and the joy of connecting with people and staying connected over time and circling back with them and always kind of having something to offer.
Cool. Anybody else have any questions or comments? No, Tiana, I'm just gonna read your message on the chat. Tiana's on a research team and they do projects with nonprofits in addition to research. So also try to connect with a professor on a project. So let's also use the people you already know, your professors in school. They may know someone or some of something. So that could also be very helpful as well.
Mhm. And
So
lots of people in their advanced degrees are doing, research to prove a theory or disprove something, right? And so it might not necessarily be work, but it could be like, hey, I worked on this research project on, adult learning theories and how it's changing for Gen Z. Just for an example from prior.
I can't say that all of this will immediately land you a job. I think one of the most important things is that you have an idea, like you have a clear idea where you want to go. Because if you're not very clear on that, then opportunities are going to come and you're just going to pick whatever feels best at that time. So the more strategic you are about planning, this is where I want to be, and this is the things that I feel like I should be doing that feel right, then it'll be a lot easier to end up in the position or the role or wherever you want to be by choice. Because I know right after I graduated college, I couldn't find a job and I had no idea what I needed to do. So I had to go back to counseling, which is what I did before I shifted into IO. And I wasn't thrilled because I didn't want to do counseling anymore, but I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a clear idea of, well, what is it that I'm interested in? I know IO, but then what about IO? I mean, there's so many things about IO. So I hope that's helpful. So Hayley, usually I ask my speakers to give us some actionable steps for all of us to work on until the next meetup. And this could be things that we do right after this call or during the next 2 weeks, just to help us implement some of the skills and some of the tips that you've given us today. Do you have some of those that you can think of?
Actionable. Well, before I do that, you mentioned something about like knowing that clarity. And I think that like if one more person when I was at this stage told me that I needed to be clear on where I was going, I was going to explode. Like I think I mentioned it earlier, I was not clear. So if you are clear, great. I think, just kind of dive into it and learn as much as you can. If you're not, don't worry because you are going to figure it out pretty quickly the more that you keep diving into different things, because real soon you'll figure out that's not for you and you'll back out and you'll move on to something different. So, the clarity is important, but I think more than anything else is grit, right? You have to have commitment to very long-term goals and just remember that your path is going to look different than everybody else's. So comparing yourself to anybody else is only going to hold you back. Actionable steps. You're trying to get a job. I would say shorten your LinkedIn link. I think I sent you steps, Gabby, that you can share with the group if you want to, real quick steps to shorten your LinkedIn. Make sure that you're very specific about like on your resume, that you tailor every single resume to the specific job. No matter how wonderful you are, if your resume doesn't have a particular amount of points in match with the job description within that particular ATS, it's going to kick it out, or it's going to disqualify you, or it's going to put you so far on the bottom of the list, no one's ever going to see your resume. I would say that an actionable step when it comes to being like academia or practitioner, I would say if you don't know which one you want to go into, that you can 100% sit in as an assistant teacher. For most professors would let that happen. Some of them require that you sign some forms beforehand. Likewise, if practitioner is your thing and you know exactly what field you want to go into, I suggest before your next meeting that you whittle down the type of practitioner that you want to be. Do you want to do corporate therapy? Do you want to do, coaching? Do you want to do you want to be an HR manager? Do you want to be a chief people officer? Like, what do you want to do with that role? And then have an idea of what kind of competencies you need in order to be successful at that role. For any role, looking at the competencies that are required for it, I think is a nice actionable step, because you can assess how many of those core competencies are natural for you, right? It's very difficult to teach somebody how to be naturally curious if they're not naturally curious. So look at that list and find out what you already have, and then you have talking points to move forward when you're talking to people and they say, oh, well, you're just a student, you don't have experience with this. You can say, oh yeah, of course, I plan to do this, this, and this, and I'm already, taking this extra certification course or mentoring with this person, right? So you kind of know where your weaknesses are ahead of time and know where those strengths and competencies lie. So you have that story to tell when it comes up, and it's not like oh yeah, I know I'll get that experience over time. And it's more like, yeah, of course I'm going to have that right now. I just got out of school and here's how I plan on countering it. Right? Like that plan, just kind of already having a strategy or a plan. Way to surprise me, Gabby. Thanks. um,
I think those are really good, because those are very actionable steps. Those are things we can all get off of here and do those. You actually noticed that on my email, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that as soon as we get off, because I do have my LinkedIn is not short, so we're all gonna work on that. But
well, and I will say, from the recruiting field, I've had a lot of clients recently talk to me about cover letters. I know everybody has their own way of doing things, and certain enterprise organizations are still very structured like this, but I will be honest and tell you, it's been about 7 years since I read a cover letter. And I've been responsible for hiring a lot of people. So I think it's important to have one, but don't stress about it. That's my last piece.
hey, well, so I know we have a couple of minutes. I know we talked about a lot of different things. Is there anything that you just feel like you have to tell us right before we get off, or do you feel like we covered all of the bases, everything you wanted to share with us?
Just don't forget, feedback is the fuel to performance. You can never, ever get better, and nobody else can ever get better without feedback. And not everybody's always going to provide it to you in the way that you feel is super constructive. But all forms of feedback are an opportunity for you to translate that into fuel for your power. You've got your superpowers, and anytime anybody provides you with feedback, it's an opportunity. And then you have an opportunity too. You have a responsibility, especially when you're a part of a team, to provide people with feedback so that they get better. So feedback is a fuel to performance. That's my quote.
I love that. Thank you. Does anybody have any last minute thoughts, questions, comments? I know Ron is just coming in clutch today with all these links.
Yeah.
You are killing it, my man. I've been sick this past couple of days, so I'm like, so thank you. This is super helpful. I always save all of the chats, so if anybody ever needs anything after the call, just reach out. I probably have it. Everything is recorded. And all of these are going to be up on the website, SEBOC website pretty soon, if not up already. So you'll be able to go back, re-listen. So that's going to be a cool resource for all of us to have pretty soon here. All right. Well, if nobody else have anything else, Hayley, thank you so much for making some time. I know you've been traveling too. You've been busy doing all the things. I'm just very happy that we were able to bring you in. I think your story is a little bit different than most of the speakers I've had a lot of PhDs and a lot of academia. So it's been really cool to have this, and consultants. So it's been a pretty cool mix of everybody and a lot of very diverse backgrounds and experiences. So I think it brings a lot of insight into this is what I can do and this is what I can be. So thank you for giving us that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to fit the mold. In fact, that can be your superpower, that you don't fit the mold. So you don't have all of those, you don't come with all that baggage.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. As always, you can reach me on my LinkedIn or email me if you need to. And you can find Hayley's LinkedIn on the link for where you sign up for this event. And yeah, so you all have a lovely, lovely 2 weeks, and I will see you in 2 weeks to learn more.
Thanks, everyone.